I thought I had finally found the kind of love that movies are made of, the kind that makes you feel safe, seen, and infinite. I used to believe that when someone promised you forever, they meant it. But life has its own way of teaching lessons, and mine began the day I met him. Before I tell you what happened, let me start from the beginning. My name is Emily Carter, and I'm 22 years old. I'm a medical student at Riverside Medical College in California. For most people, college is about parties, friends, and freedom. But for me, it's always been about focus, sleepless nights, and ambition. I've worked part-time in the college library since my first year, spending most of my evenings surrounded by the smell of coffee and the rustle of pages. My dream is to become a pediatric surgeon one day, a doctor who makes children smile again. That dream kept me grounded when life around me was unpredictable. I come from a modest background, nothing glamorous, nothing too comfortable either. My parents have always supported me as much as they could, but most of what I've achieved has come from persistence and sacrifice. I never believed in shortcuts, and I certainly never believed in falling in love too easily. I was the kind of girl who rolled her eyes at romance novels. But that changed the moment I met Ryan. It was during my second semester in the anatomy lab. I remember the smell of antiseptic in the air and the sound of students flipping through their notes. I was bent over my notebook, completely absorbed, when someone dropped a pen beside me. I picked it up and looked up, straight into a pair of calm brown eyes. "Thanks," he said with a smile that managed to look both confident and kind. That was Ryan. At first, he was just another classmate. We exchanged casual greetings in the lab, small talk after lectures, and occasional study tips. But something about him stood out. He had this calm, easy energy that drew people in. He wasn't the loud, attention-seeking kind of guy. He was thoughtful, always listening more than he spoke, and when he did speak, his words carried weight. One afternoon, after class, he joined me in the library where I worked. "You're here every day," he said, placing his backpack on the table. "Do you ever take a break?" I laughed for the first time in days. "Doctors don't get breaks," I replied. "At least not the ones who want to change the world." He smiled and said, "Then I guess you're going to be one of the best." It was such a simple exchange, but it stayed with me. Over the following weeks, we started studying together more often. Sometimes he'd bring coffee for both of us, or we'd share lunch under the big oak tree behind the college building. I began looking forward to those small moments, his laughter, his stories, the way he always noticed when I was stressed. Slowly, without realizing it, I started letting my walls down. There was something safe about Ryan. Something steady. For the first time, I wasn't just chasing grades or deadlines, I was learning what it felt like to be cared for. It wasn't a whirlwind romance or a dramatic confession. It was quiet, gradual, and comforting, like the warmth of sunlight after a long storm. Sometimes I'd catch myself daydreaming during lectures, imagining what life would be like after graduation. Maybe we'd both work in the same hospital. Maybe we'd build something together. I didn't know it then, but those innocent daydreams were the foundation of a heartbreak waiting to happen. Because when you give your heart to someone, you never think they'll be the one to break it. And when you believe in forever, you don't realize how fragile that word really is until the moment it shatters. If someone had told me that a simple study partnership would one day turn into the most complicated chapter of my life, I would have laughed. But that's exactly what happened with Ryan. Our connection didn't start with fireworks or instant chemistry. It started with notes, textbooks, and caffeine. The kind of love that sneaks up on you when you least expect it. After that first day in the anatomy lab, Ryan began showing up more often wherever I was. Sometimes I'd be in the library, buried under my medical journals, and I'd look up to find him standing there with his usual easy smile. "You're here again," he'd say, as if he was surprised, even though he'd seen me there every day for weeks. I'd laugh and say, "You say that like you weren't expecting it." He'd shrug, pretending to look casual. Maybe I wasn't. Maybe I just got lucky. What started as casual encounters soon turned into routine. We began studying together, sometimes in the library, sometimes in the small garden outside the lecture hall. Ryan had this calm energy that balanced my constant anxiety about grades and exams. He'd make jokes during our late-night study sessions, imitating professors or exaggerating medical terms until I couldn't stop laughing. For someone who lived by discipline and structure, he was a breath of fresh air. There were moments when I caught myself watching him, how his brow furrowed in concentration, how he bit the cap of his pen when he was deep in thought. And sometimes, when our eyes met, I'd feel a strange flutter in my chest, a warmth I couldn't quite explain. I tried to ignore it at first. Love wasn't on my agenda, but Ryan had a way of slipping through the cracks in my carefully built walls. One evening, after a long lab session, we walked out together under the soft orange glow of the campus streetlights. The air smelled like rain, and everything felt calm. Ryan glanced at me and said, "Do you ever think about what life will look like after all this?" I smiled. "You mean after med school? I'll probably be sleeping for a year." He laughed. "No, I mean after. When you're a doctor, when you've made it. What then?" I hesitated, thinking about the future I'd only ever imagined in vague outlines. "I guess I just want to help people. To make a difference. To matter." He nodded thoughtfully and said, "You already matter." Those 3 words sank into me like sunlight through clouds. It wasn't a grand confession, but it meant everything. Over the next few months, our friendship deepened into something neither of us could deny. We started sharing more than just study material. Our fears, our dreams, even the little things we never told anyone else. I told him about my childhood, about growing up in a small town where no one thought I'd make it to med school. He told me about his parents' divorce and how he'd spent most of his life trying to prove he was strong enough to stand on his own. Some nights, we'd sit on the library steps long after closing hours, watching the stars. Ryan would rest his arm on the back of the bench, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his skin, but never so close that it crossed the line. It was the kind of closeness that said more than words ever could. Then one evening, right after our midterm results came out, he showed up outside my dorm with a small white box in his hand. "You did amazing," he said, grinning. "You beat everyone in class." I smiled, half embarrassed, half proud. "It's not a competition." "Maybe not," he said, "but I still think you deserve this." Inside the box was a delicate silver bracelet, simple yet beautiful, engraved with one word, forever. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I looked up at him, and he just smiled that quiet, steady smile of his. "It's not fancy," he said, "but I wanted you to have something that reminds you how far you've come." And maybe, his voice trailed off, softer now, "how long I want to stay." I didn't know what to say. My throat tightened, and for the first time in a long time, I felt tears burning at the back of my eyes, not from pain, but from a kind of fragile happiness I'd never felt before. I whispered, "It's perfect." He took my hand and gently fastened the bracelet around my wrist. The metal felt cool against my skin, but the moment his fingers brushed mine, warmth spread through me like a heartbeat. For a while, neither of us said a word. The night air carried the faint sound of crickets, and somewhere in the distance, the college bell chimed. Ryan finally broke the silence. "You know, Emily," he said, looking directly into my eyes, "sometimes I think fate just waits for the right people to meet. Maybe this is one of those times." I wanted to tell him that I didn't believe in fate, that I believed in choices, effort, and hard work. But in that moment, staring into his eyes, I couldn't bring myself to say it. Because maybe, just maybe, I wanted to believe too. From that night on, things between us changed. We weren't just study partners anymore. We were something more, something unspoken but undeniable. When he walked into a room, my heart noticed. When he laughed, the world seemed lighter. And when he looked at me, I felt like I wasn't just another face in a crowded lecture hall. I felt like I was someone's favorite chapter. If only I had known how quickly that chapter would end, maybe I would have guarded my heart a little better. But love doesn't come with warnings. It just comes, and you don't realize it's dangerous until you're already falling. If the early days of our relationship were soft like spring, what came next felt like summer, bright, alive, and full of promise. Ryan and I had found a rhythm that made everything seem effortless. We weren't just classmates anymore. We were partners in every sense. We studied together, ate together, laughed together, and planned a future that felt so close I could almost touch it. Every morning, before class, he'd be waiting for me by the coffee stand outside the medical building, holding my usual drink, black coffee, with a splash of vanilla syrup. For the doctor in training, he'd say, with that teasing grin. I'd roll my eyes, pretending not to smile, but inside, I was glowing. No one had ever cared for me like that before, so simply, so sincerely. Our days were a blend of ambition and affection. We'd spend long hours buried in textbooks, highlighting paragraphs and quizzing each other before exams. He had this way of making even the hardest subjects feel manageable. When I doubted myself, he reminded me who I was. "You're brilliant, Emily," he'd whisper. "You just forget sometimes." And I believed him. With Ryan beside me, I started believing that nothing in the world could break me. There were little rituals we built along the way, small, quiet promises that became the foundation of what I thought was forever. Every Friday night, after study sessions, we'd walk to a small diner 2 blocks from campus. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. We'd sit in the same booth by the window, order the same milkshakes, and talk about everything except medicine. Ryan would talk about his dream of becoming a neurosurgeon, about how he wanted to help people who'd lost hope. I'd listen, admiring his passion, and he'd say, "When you open your pediatric clinic, I'll be right there beside you." Those words made me blush every single time. I used to picture it, the 2 of us in white coats, our names printed on the same hospital board, sharing the same purpose and maybe even the same last name someday. It all felt so real, so possible. He often talked about how he didn't believe in grand gestures, only consistency. "Anyone can make promises," he told me once, "but real love is about showing up every day." And he did, every single day. When I was too tired to walk back to my dorm, he'd carry my books for me. When I forgot to eat, he'd show up with takeout. When I failed one of my mock exams, he didn't try to fix it, he just sat beside me in silence until I stopped crying. That kind of love felt rare, and I was lucky enough to have it. I remember one particular night, it was raining outside, and the campus was nearly empty. Ryan and I were sitting under the big oak tree near the west courtyard, huddled under one umbrella. He looked at me and said, "Do you ever think about us, like after graduation?" I laughed softly. "Of course I do. I just don't know where we'll end up. Life is unpredictable." He tilted his head, smiling. "Maybe. But some things are worth fighting for. I can see it, us in the same hospital, saving lives together. You, with your gentle heart, and me trying to keep up." I looked at him for a moment and felt my heart swell with something I hadn't felt before. "Peace." I whispered, "I'd like that." Later that night, lying in my dorm bed, I turned the bracelet on my wrist over and over, tracing the engraved word forever with my thumb. The metal was cold, but the meaning was warm. I believed it with every part of me, that what we had was unbreakable. Our classmates used to joke that we were the perfect couple. Even professors noticed the bond we shared. We weren't loud about our relationship. We didn't post pictures or make grand declarations. But people could see it, the way he looked at me, the way I smiled when his name popped up on my phone. To me, it wasn't about showing off. It was about feeling something real in a world where so much was temporary. The more time we spent together, the more I shared with him. He knew about my insecurities, my struggles, my fear of failure. I told him about the nights I stayed awake worrying if I was good enough to become a doctor. He'd take my hand and say, "You're not just good enough, you're meant for this." His faith in me made me stronger, and somewhere along the way, I stopped needing to convince myself that I belonged here. He made me believe I already did. He even started calling me Dr. Carter as a joke. One day, he'd say, "I'll walk into your clinic and say, 'Dr. Carter, my heart hurts.' And you'll tell me to stop being dramatic." We'd laugh until our stomachs hurt, never realizing how ironic that joke would become, because someday, it really would be my heart that hurt. At that point in my life, everything felt perfect. My grades were excellent, my future seemed bright, and the man I loved was by my side. I didn't know that perfection is often the calm before the storm. I didn't see the cracks forming beneath the surface. Because when you trust someone completely, you stop looking for signs that something's wrong. You mistake silence for peace, routine for stability, and love for loyalty. And that's exactly what I did. I built my world around Ryan, never realizing he was the very person who would make it fall apart. They say love makes you blind, but I think it's more than that. It makes you selective. You see only what you want to see, hear only what you want to believe. At that point, Ryan and I had been together for nearly a year, and I was so wrapped up in our little world that I didn't notice how fragile it really was. But Sophia did. Sophia had been my closest friend since freshman year. She was bold where I was quiet, confident where I was cautious. We'd spent countless nights studying together, complaining about professors, and planning our futures. She was the kind of friend who told you the truth, even when you didn't want to hear it. So when she first mentioned her doubts about Ryan, I brushed them off like dust. We were sitting in the dorm common room one evening, sipping hot chocolate after a long day of classes. "You really trust him that much?" she asked, her tone casual but her eyes sharp. I smiled without hesitation. "Of course I do. He's never given me a reason not to." Sophia leaned back in her chair. "That's exactly what worries me." I frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means sometimes people seem perfect because we never give them a chance to prove otherwise." Her words stung, not because they were harsh, but because they planted a seed of doubt I didn't want. I sighed, trying to keep my voice steady. "Sophia, I know him. He's not like that. He's not the type to flirt around or play games." She shrugged, stirring her drink slowly. "Maybe you're right. But if he's as loyal as you think, a small test won't hurt him, right?" I blinked. "A test? What kind of test?" Sophia looked at me for a moment, as if measuring my reaction. "Relax. Nothing crazy. Just, I'll talk to him. See how he responds. Friendly at first. If he's truly committed to you, he won't cross the line." I immediately shook my head. "That's ridiculous, Sophia. You don't need to test someone you trust." She gave a small, knowing smile. "Then why does your voice sound nervous?" Her question hit me harder than I expected. I wanted to say it was because the whole idea was unnecessary, but deep down I realized I wasn't entirely calm. A tiny, uninvited fear crept into my chest, the kind that only appears when you have something to lose. "I just think it's unfair," I muttered finally. "He doesn't deserve that." Sophia nodded. "Maybe. But if he's as genuine as you believe, he'll pass without even knowing there was a test." That night, as I lay in bed staring at the bracelet on my wrist, I replayed her words again and again. "A small test won't hurt him." I hated that I was even considering it, but curiosity has a way of disguising itself as reason. I told myself it wasn't about doubting Ryan. It was about proving his loyalty once and for all. I needed reassurance, not because of something he'd done, but because of how much he meant to me. The next day, I agreed. "Fine," I told Sophia as we walked across campus. "You can talk to him, but keep it casual, okay? No flirting, no traps." She smiled slyly. "Of course. I'll just be friendly." I tried to laugh it off, but my stomach was tight the whole day. Every time Ryan texted me, I found myself reading his messages more carefully than usual. I hated it, this strange mix of trust and insecurity. Later that week, Sophia began her part of the plan. She started chatting with him in study groups, complimenting his presentations and cracking light jokes. Ryan didn't mention it to me, and that should have been fine, but somehow, it made me uneasy. Sophia would update me after each interaction, her tone carefully neutral. "He's polite," she'd say. "Friendly. But he just seemed to enjoy talking to me." I forced a smile every time. That's just Ryan. He's kind to everyone. But each update chipped away at my certainty, leaving behind something raw and anxious. For the first time since we started dating, I found myself questioning him, wondering what he might be saying when I wasn't around. By the end of the week, Sophia's tone had changed. "He's starting to open up more," she said quietly. "Nothing inappropriate yet. But Emily, I think he's curious. I can see it in the way he talks." I didn't want to hear it. "You're reading too much into it." "Maybe," she said softly. but maybe I'm not. That night, I barely slept. I kept twisting the silver bracelet on my wrist, watching the word forever catch the dim light of my lamp. For the first time, it didn't feel comforting, it felt heavy. I wanted to believe Sophia was wrong, that Ryan would never fail me. But a part of me, the small, fearful part, whispered that sometimes love isn't broken by lies. Sometimes it's broken by truth. And by the time I finally closed my eyes, one thought haunted me. What if I was about to learn something I never wanted to know? The following week felt heavier than I expected. Sophia's plan was in motion, but it wasn't some clever game anymore. It felt like a storm building slowly over everything I loved. Every time I saw Ryan, my chest tightened. He still greeted me the same way, still brought me coffee, still smiled when I walked into a room. Nothing about him seemed different, and yet everything felt wrong. Sophia began her friendly approach with precision. She knew how to test someone without being obvious. At first, she talked to Ryan casually after class, small talk about professors, grades, or upcoming assignments. Then, gradually, she started weaving in little compliments. "You have such a calm way of explaining things." Or, "You're probably the smartest guy in our year." Things that could sound innocent or not. The first few days went exactly how I hoped. Ryan kept the conversations short and polite. He even mentioned once that Sophia seemed funny and straightforward, but there was no sign of danger. I remember thinking maybe I'd been foolish to let Sophia convince me of this whole idea. Maybe Ryan really was as loyal as I believed. But then small shifts began to appear. It started with how he mentioned her name more often. Sophia said the new anatomy professor used to work at Stanford. "Sophia's got the best notes for pathology. We should borrow them." It was never anything alarming, but every time he said her name, something inside me flinched. A few days later, Sophia told me that Ryan had started replying faster to her messages. "At first, it was just school stuff," she said carefully. "But today he asked what I was doing after class." I stared at her, unsure how to respond. She continued, "I told him I was going to the campus cafe. He said maybe he'd stop by if he finished early." The air left my lungs. "He said that?" Sophia nodded. I didn't confirm. I just said, "Sure if you want. But I think he's testing the waters." I wanted to believe she was wrong. I told myself she was misinterpreting his words. Ryan was friendly, that's all. He wasn't flirting. He was just being himself. That night, when I met him for dinner, I tried to look for signs of guilt in his eyes, any shift in his tone. But he was the same Ryan, warm, charming, focused entirely on me. For a moment, I almost convinced myself the whole plan was pointless. Then the weekend came. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon when Sophia texted me. He asked me to meet him for coffee. Just the two of us. My hands went cold. I read the message 3 times, hoping I was misunderstanding. But it was right there, clear as day. He had asked her out, if not romantically, then certainly personally. Sophia followed up. "I'm going. I'll record everything. Are you sure you want this?" I didn't respond for a minute. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it might break through my ribs. Then, finally, I typed back. "Yes. I need to know." The cafe was one we both knew, the same small place where Ryan and I used to sit for hours. Sophia told me she'd sit near the back corner, her phone hidden in her purse, recording the conversation. I spent that entire hour pacing my dorm room, checking my phone every few seconds, staring at the bracelet on my wrist, and hating how the word forever felt like a joke now. When Sophia finally called me, her voice was quiet. "He failed, Emily." My throat closed. "Tell me." She sighed. At first, it was innocent. He asked how I was doing, talked about classes, made jokes. But then he leaned in and said I was different. He told me I made him laugh in a way no one else did. I gripped my phone so tightly it hurt. "No, he didn't." "I wish I was lying," she said softly. "And then he said he'd like to spend more time with me outside of school. He even said," she hesitated. He said, "I feel like I could tell you things I can't tell Emily." It felt like someone had taken that bracelet and wrapped it around my throat. I couldn't breathe. My chest ached with a mix of disbelief and heartbreak. I wanted to scream, cry, deny it, but my body wouldn't move. I just sat there, frozen, as everything I thought was real began to unravel. Sophia's voice was faint. I recorded everything. I'll send it to you when you're ready. Don't, I whispered. Not yet. That night was the longest of my life. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, tears slipping quietly down my cheeks. Every word he'd ever said replayed in my mind. Every smile, every promise, every I love you. They all sounded empty now, rehearsed, recycled. He hadn't just flirted with someone else. He'd repeated our moments, our words, as if they meant nothing. By morning, I had a message from Sophia. It was the audio file. I sat at my desk, staring at it for a long time before pressing play. His voice filled the room. Warm, familiar, and cruel. You're really easy to talk to, Sophia. I don't know why I never noticed that before. Then laughter, his and hers. Maybe you were too busy being the perfect boyfriend, Sophia teased. Maybe, he said, his voice lowering slightly. Or maybe I was looking in the wrong place. That was the moment my heart broke completely. I remember covering my mouth, trying not to make a sound as sobs shook through me. The betrayal wasn't loud. It was quiet and suffocating, the kind that steals your breath instead of your voice. I looked down at the bracelet he'd given me, the word forever glinting faintly in the morning light, and all I could think was how easily he'd lied. Sophia came to my room later that day. She didn't say anything. She just sat beside me and held my hand. After a while, I looked at her and whispered, "He's not who I thought he was." She nodded gently. "No, he isn't. But you needed to see that." For the first time, anger replaced my pain. It wasn't just sadness anymore, it was fire. He played with me. He made me believe I was his world. Sophia met my eyes. Then make him see what it feels like when the world turns against him. That's when it hit me. I wasn't going to cry anymore. I wasn't going to beg or confront him blindly. I was going to show him what it meant to lose something real. The girl who had once believed in forever was gone. And in her place stood someone who was finally ready to fight back. The night after Sophia told me what had happened between her and Ryan, I couldn't bring myself to sleep. My room felt too small, too quiet, too full of memories I suddenly hated. Every corner seemed to whisper his name. My phone was on the desk, and the audio file she'd sent me sat there like a living thing, waiting, tempting, haunting. I must have opened and closed that message a dozen times before I finally pressed play. His voice came through immediately, familiar, soft, almost loving. "You're really easy to talk to, Sophia," he said, laughing lightly. "I don't know why I never noticed that before." Sophia's voice followed, pretending to sound casual. "Maybe because you were too busy being the perfect boyfriend." Ryan chuckled. Maybe, or maybe I was looking in the wrong place. Something inside me shattered right then. The sound of his laughter, once my favorite thing in the world, now felt cruel. My stomach turned, and for a moment I thought I might be sick. I paused the recording, but his words kept echoing anyway. The wrong place. I sat there frozen, my hands gripping the edge of the desk. Tears burned down my cheeks, hot and endless. Everything I had believed about him, about us, collapsed like a house of cards. That bracelet on my wrist, the one that had once made me feel loved, now felt like a chain. When morning came, I was still awake. My eyes were swollen, my throat hurt from crying, and the world outside looked gray. I didn't go to class that day. I couldn't. Sophia came over quietly around noon, her expression filled with guilt and worry. She sat beside me, without saying a word. For a while, there was only silence. Then she said softly, "You didn't deserve this, Emily." I looked at her with tired eyes. No one ever thinks they do. But I still let it happen. She shook her head. "Don't do that. You trusted him because he made you believe you could. That's not weakness, it's love. It's what good people do." Her words broke something open in me. I buried my face in my hands and sobbed. "I thought he was my forever, Sophia. I thought he was my person." "I know," she whispered. And now you know who he really is. When I finally stopped crying, she showed me her phone. There's more, she said quietly. You should hear it. You need to. I hesitated, but she pressed play before I could stop her. Ryan's voice again, low, calm, confident. I mean, Emily's great. She's stable, you know? Focused. But sometimes she's so serious. It's nice to talk to someone who's more fun. That one sentence hurt more than any betrayal could. He'd reduced me, everything I'd given, to a single word, serious. As if loving him, supporting him, being real somehow wasn't enough. I stood up suddenly, pacing the room. My voice shook as I said, he used the same words, Sophia. The same lines. Everything he ever said to me, he said to you. Sophia nodded slowly. That's why I recorded it. You needed proof. Now you have it. Proof. I hated that word. Proof meant there was no going back. Proof meant every sweet memory had been rewritten by his lies. I turned toward the window. The sky outside was dull, heavy with rain. My reflection stared back at me, tired, broken, but strangely calm. I said quietly, he thinks he can just move on like nothing happened. Like I'll cry for a while and forgive him. But I won't. Sophia's voice was firm. Good. You shouldn't. He doesn't deserve a single tear. I nodded slowly, wiping my face. For the first time since it all began, my sadness started turning into something sharper, something powerful. It wasn't revenge, not exactly. It was self-respect. It was a need to take control of the story he had tried to ruin. I want him to see what he's done, I said. I want him to see my face when he realizes I know everything. Sophia's expression softened, but there was approval in her eyes. Then let's make sure he does. That afternoon, we sat together and planned how to confront him. We didn't talk about anger or shouting. That wasn't who I was. No, I wanted silence to be my weapon, the kind of silence that makes people crumble. Sophia suggested that we invite him to her dorm room, make him believe she wanted to see him again. He'll come, she said confidently. Men like him always do. I nodded. And I'll be there. When she left that evening, I sat alone in my room, staring at my reflection once more. My eyes were no longer soft or trusting. They were steady, cold, even. I took off the bracelet Ryan had given me and placed it on the desk. The word forever gleamed under the lamplight, mocking me. I whispered to it. Forever ended the moment you lied. That night, as rain began to fall outside my window, I felt something shift inside me. The heartbreak was still there, but it no longer controlled me. The pain had turned into focus, and the tears had dried into resolve. I was done being the girl who waited for explanations. I was ready to be the woman who gave answers instead. Tomorrow, Ryan would walk into Sophia's dorm, thinking he still had control. Tomorrow, he would learn that I was no longer his to deceive. And tomorrow, he would finally see what it looked like when a heart he broke learned how to fight back. The next day felt like the calm before a storm. Everything around me seemed strangely quiet, like the world itself was holding its breath. Sophia and I had decided to act that evening. She'd invite Ryan to her dorm room under the pretense of wanting to talk privately, perhaps to clear the air after their cafe meeting. He wouldn't suspect anything. His ego wouldn't let him. I spent the afternoon pacing in my room, my heartbeat sinking with the clock's slow ticking. I wasn't scared, not anymore, but my chest was tight with anticipation. The recording kept replaying in my mind, his voice twisting and reshaping everything I'd believed in. Each word gave me more strength. When evening arrived, the campus was bathed in orange light. Students walked past my window, laughing and chatting as if the world hadn't fallen apart for me. I stared at them, wondering if they could tell what I was about to do, wondering if they'd ever felt what it was like to love someone who lied so beautifully. Sophia called. He's coming in 20 minutes, she said. Okay. You ready? I took a deep breath. I've never been more ready. I left my dorm, my steps steady and deliberate. The air outside was cool, carrying the faint scent of pine and rain-soaked pavement. Every step toward Sophia's building felt like walking toward closure. When I reached her door, Sophia let me in silently. Her room was dimly lit, one small lamp glowing near the desk. "He'll be here any minute," she whispered. I nodded and moved to stand near the corner, half hidden behind the curtain. My heart was pounding, but not from fear, from control. This was my moment. A few minutes later, there was a knock. Sophia's calm voice floated through the room. "Come in." The door opened slowly, and Ryan stepped inside. He looked as confident as ever, hair perfectly in place, that same smile he always used to disarm people. He was holding a single red rose and a paper cup of coffee. "Hey," he said warmly. "You sounded serious on the phone. What's going on?" Sophia smiled faintly, motioning for him to come in. "I just thought we should talk about the other day." He nodded and stepped inside, letting the door close behind him. "Yeah, I've been meaning to talk to you too," he said smoothly. "I feel like we had a connection, but maybe it was a little confusing." That was the moment I stepped forward. "Confusing?" I said quietly. Ryan froze. The color drained from his face as he turned toward my voice. The rose slipped from his hand and landed on the floor. "Emily," he breathed. What are you doing here?" I stared at him for a long moment. He looked smaller somehow, weaker than I remembered. "Funny," I said slowly. "That's what I wanted to ask you." He ran a hand through his hair, his voice stumbling. "This isn't what it looks like. I swear, Sophia and I." Sophia cut him off calmly. "Ryan, you don't need to explain. She already knows." His eyes darted between us. "Knows what?" I took a step closer, my voice firm but steady. "That you lied. That you played with me. That everything you said to me, you were saying to her too." He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Sophia quietly walked over to her desk and pressed a button on her phone. The room filled with his own voice, the recording from the cafe. His laugh, his flirting, his words about being in the wrong place. Ryan's shoulders tensed. "Where did you get that?" he demanded, his tone sharp with panic. "From you," Sophia said simply. "You gave it to us, with every word you spoke." The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear the rain tapping faintly against the window. I could hear my own heartbeat. Ryan finally looked at me, his voice breaking. "Emily, please. I didn't mean it like that. It was just harmless talk. You know I love you." "Love," I repeated, laughing bitterly. "That's what you call this? You tell one girl she's your forever and another that she makes you feel alive? You lied to both of us." He shook his head desperately. No, it wasn't like that. Sophia came on to me, and I didn't want to hurt her feelings." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "Really? Because it sounded like you were enjoying every minute of it." He looked cornered now, his charm slipping away. I could see the guilt, the panic, the fear. For once, he wasn't in control. I stepped closer until I was just a few feet away. "You know what hurts the most, Ryan? It's not what you did. It's how easily you did it. How easily you looked me in the eyes every day and said you loved me." He swallowed hard, his eyes glistening. "I made a mistake, Emily. Please don't do this." I took off the bracelet he'd given me, the one with forever engraved on it, and held it up between us. "You see this?" My voice cracked slightly, but I didn't let it break me. This used to mean something to me. Now it's just a reminder of how foolish I was. Then I let it drop. The sound of it hitting the floor echoed in the small room, final and sharp. Ryan reached out instinctively, as if to stop me, but I stepped back. "Don't," I said firmly. "You've done enough." The anger I'd been holding for days rose inside me, not wild or uncontrolled, but cold and precise. "You know, I used to think people only break hearts by leaving. But you stayed just long enough to destroy mine from the inside." He tried to speak again, but I didn't give him the chance. My hand moved on its own. The sound of the slap filled the room, a sound I'll never forget. It wasn't out of rage. It was closure. It was justice. Ryan stood there, stunned, his cheek red, his pride shattered. I looked at him one last time and said quietly, "This is what it feels like when the truth finally hits back." Then I turned to Sophia. "Let's go." We walked past him, his voice calling after me. Emily, please. Don't leave like this. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. The door clicked shut behind us, and for the first time in weeks, I felt free. Outside, the air was cool, the rain light but steady. I stood there for a moment, breathing it in. Sophia placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. You okay? I nodded slowly. No, I said truthfully. But I will be. As we walked away from her dorm, I realized something profound. Ryan hadn't just taught me what betrayal felt like. He taught me what strength looked like. And maybe that was the lesson I was always meant to learn. The days that followed felt strangely peaceful, almost like standing in the quiet after a thunderstorm. For the first time in months, I didn't wake up to a message from Ryan, didn't check my phone expecting an apology, and didn't wear the bracelet that had once symbolized love. I was free, tired, bruised, but free. Word about the confrontation spread quickly around campus. It didn't take long before everyone knew the truth. The recording made its way through whispers and group chats, and Ryan's name lost its charm. The same people who once admired him now avoided him in the hallways. He tried to talk to me once, but I walked right past him. Some part of me pitied him, but not enough to forget. Meanwhile, Sophia stood by me through it all. She became more than a friend. She became my anchor. She reminded me that not everyone who enters your life is meant to hurt you, that sometimes betrayal simply clears space for better people to stay. We spent long evenings in the library again, not as girls haunted by heartbreak, but as women rebuilding themselves one chapter at a time. Slowly, my life began to heal. I threw myself into my studies, not to escape the pain but to transform it. Every late night at the lab, every exam, every small victory became a step toward reclaiming the version of myself I'd almost lost. I learned that love should never come at the cost of your peace. And trust, real trust, isn't proven through tests or promises. It's proven through consistency, loyalty, and honesty, even when no one is watching. Graduation came faster than I expected. As I stood in my white coat, surrounded by classmates and professors, I spotted Sophia in the crowd cheering for me. The sun hit my face, and for the first time in a long while, I smiled without pretending. Ryan was there too, somewhere in the back. Our eyes met for just a second. There was no hatred left in me, only clarity. He gave a small, regretful nod, and I nodded back before turning away. That moment wasn't about revenge, it was about closure. As I walked across the stage to receive my medical degree, I realized something beautiful. Every heartbreak, every betrayal, every tear had led me right here, to a stronger, wiser version of myself. When the ceremony ended, Sophia hugged me and said, "Told you you'd make it, Dr. Carter." I laughed, tears of joy finally replacing the ones I'd cried for pain. "Yeah," I said softly. "I did." That night, lying in bed, I looked at my wrist, bare now, without that silver bracelet, and smiled. Forever wasn't a word someone else could promise me anymore. It was something I would build for myself, through my choices, my courage, and my strength. Because in the end, Ryan didn't break me. He simply showed me what I was capable of surviving. Sometimes love is the lesson, not the destination. And sometimes, losing someone is the only way to find yourself. If you liked my story, don't forget to subscribe to Stories Wave for more heartfelt stories like this one. I'd really love to know where you watching my video from, and what time is it there right now?